Making your first ever crochet garment can truly seem like a mammoth task. It is a project that takes time and patience to complete. However, the satisfying feeling you get from completing something you can actually wear is irreplaceable. I've been designing crochet garments since 2016 and have tried and tested a few techniques. So, which styles and constructions should you try as a complete beginner, and which ones should you tackle later on? So, let's find out. Before we delve into the different construction types of crochet garments, I must start with a word about tension or gauge. So, when you dive into a pool of making garments, you will hear about this a lot. So, trust me when I say that you will save yourself a heap of time and grey hair if you learn about tension right from the start. Every good crochet garment pattern will have a tension set by the designer. Tension is basically your unique style of crocheting. It's typically measured over a square of 10 by 10 centimeters or 4 by 4 inches. So you will mark out this area and count how many stitches and how many rounds or rows fit into this area. In order to reproduce the pattern correctly and to the measurements, you will have to match the tension that it's set by the designer and stated in every good pattern. You can do this by adjusting your hook size. So if your tension is too loose, you need to choose a smaller hook. If your tension is too tight, you need to relax and choose a larger hook to match the tension. So, before we delve into the construction styles, let me talk about the written crochet patterns. Well written crochet garment patterns will not only guide you through making your first ever sweater, but they will also teach you great things. So, although you should do as pattern instructions tell you, taking notice on how things are constructed, shaped, and finished off is a good way to learn basics of garment making. Don't underestimate reading through the entire pattern before you start, as this can help you understand the construction, and you are less likely to get stuck and struggle with the pattern. And the knowledge you gain will be invaluable when you tackle other patterns and garment constructions later on. Now, let's take a look at different construction styles. And before we get into anything super technical, there are two main groups of crochet sweater constructions. So, first one are separate panels sewn together sweaters. So these sweaters are simply made up from separate pieces of crochet fabric and then sewn together at the very end. Second group of sweaters are seamless or relatively seamless sweaters that are worked in one piece, which means that most of the crochet sweater is done in one piece with minimal sewing at the end or no sewing at all. So, basic sweater from 4 rectangles. The absolute basic sweater you can make is constructed from 4 simple rectangles. You will need 2 identical rectangles, one for the front, one for the back panel, and then other 2 identical rectangles, one for each sleeve. Then we will sew the front panel to the back panel at shoulder seams, leaving an opening for the neck. Then sew the sleeve rectangles onto the main body, lining up the shoulder seam with the middle of the sleeve rectangle. Then you can sew up the sides of your sweater and continue with the underside of your sleeves to create a sweater. This style of sweater works best with oversized sweaters as there is no shaping involved at all. This style is by far the easiest to customize to your size. When it comes to adjusting the size, you can easily crochet the rectangles for the front and back panels and for the sleeves wider or longer. But please remember to decrease or increase the finished size of the rectangles equally for the front and back panels and for your sleeves so they are identical in size. There are also variations to the basic rectangle shape you can use to shape a little bit to give your sweater more of a style and better fit. So when it comes to crocheting separate pieces, you can add a different neckline shaping to the front panel of your sweater. So let's look at different neckline shapings. First one is the crew neckline. You can create this type of neckline by missing stitches in the middle of the front panel and working the last 3 to 5 rows of your shoulder, of the shoulder side of your panel, only across the shoulders, kind of leaving the stitches out in the middle. Second type is your scoop neckline. This is created very similarly as the crew neckline, but you will kind of intentionally miss the stitches in the middle and then work the last 10 to 15 rows split just across the shoulders for kind of deeper neckline. So that's your scoop neckline. And then we've got a few different variations. We've got square neckline. So it's variation of the scoop neckline, but the neck opening is created in kind of like a sharp square corners. Then we move on to V neckline, which is another variation of the scoop neckline, but the finished shape of the neckline is in the shape of a letter V. Then we've got another variation of the V neckline, which is the sweetheart neckline. And as you can see, it starts off as the V-neck, and then the V-neck is then squared off towards the shoulders for a sweetheart shape. Then we've got boat neckline. This can be created by leaving a large opening for the neck by sewing the front and back panels kind of just further down just across the shoulders here, which will then create a large opening at the top. However, it doesn't dip down as the crew or scoop neckline, so it's kind of created with identical front and back panels. Then we move on to the turtle neckline. Oh, that ran away with me. So the turtle neckline, where we are, here is turtle neckline. So turtle neckline is the first of the extended neckline. So all the other necklines were kind of created by missing stitches in the middle or sewing up the front and back panel in a different manner. But the turtle neckline is first of the extended necklines, which means that after you finish the neckline opening by either sewing the front and back panel and leaving opening in the middle, you will then kind of work on top of the neckline opening, creating a turtle neckline. Turtle neckline is very often ribbed and it's really close to your neck for added warmth. And the other type of extended neckline is the cowl neckline. So it's much looser than turtleneck. It's kind of like a big fashion accessory. You can it's full of drape, full of either texture or lace. You can use fancy stitches. You can make it kind of as wide and as oversized as you wish, or just kind of a smaller cowl that drapes down. Just imagine us making a sweater and then a separate cowl and then just attaching a cowl to your sweater. So that's a cowl neckline for your sweater. So apart from neckline shaping, to give your sweater a bit more style and fit, you can actually shape your sleeves. So you can add shaping to your sleeves. So let's look at the different sleeves. The very basic is the straight sleeve, which means that you can crochet the sleeve as a rectangle with no shaping at all. The one thing you can do is actually pull the sleeve with a ribbed cuff at the very bottom. Second type of sleeve that is really easy to make is the tapered sleeve as well. So tapered sleeves are crocheted either from the widest point, which attaches to the body, down towards the cuff. In this case, you will be decreasing from the widest point towards the cuff to give your sleeve a bit more shape. So depending on the stitch that you're using or the pattern calls for, this could be done every 3, 4 or 5 rounds, depending on how much taper you want for your sleeve. Tapered sleeves can also be actually crocheted from the cuff up towards the widest point of your sleeve. In this case, you will be increasing. So you start with the smallest point, which is your cuff, and then you just carry on increasing towards the widest point. Again, depending on the stitch you're using, this could be done every 3, 4, 5 rounds. Then we move on to the next one, which is the dolman or the batwing sleeve. So as the name suggests, this sleeve starts off fitted around your cuff, but then it extends into a very, very wide sleeve closer to the body in the underarm. So the dolman sleeves are very often sewn in as a dropped shoulder sleeve because of the size, basically. Basically, batwing tells you. So when you spread your arms out wearing a batwing sleeve sweater, you will kind of look like you've got wings because the sleeve is actually really, really wide. So it makes a real fashion statement. And the last type of sleeve I want to talk about is the balloon sleeve. So this is balloon sleeves are basically rectangles. There is no shape into balloon sleeve. The only difference is that the balloon sleeve is actually oversized sleeve, so you make it quite wide at the top, and you just carry on in a straight rectangle. The only shaping added to the balloon sleeve is with the cuff. So the number of stitches for your cuff is very often half the number of stitches to your balloon sleeve, even less sometimes depending on how big the balloon sleeve is, but very often is half the number compared to the stitches of the sleeve, which means that you kind of pull it in with the cuff, which gives it that balloon look, balloon shape. So those were the sleeve types of sleeves. Now the way you kind of attach the sleeve to the main body of your sweater, there are two different types. So we've got the dropped shoulder sleeve, which means that the basic sleeve, whatever the shape is, it could be dolman, it could be tapered, it could be just a square rectangle. But when you kind of just sew it onto the basic rectangle front and back panel, this is called drop shoulder sleeve because there is no kind of shaping around the armhole. There is no allowance for the sleeve. It's basically just sewn onto the basic rectangle, as opposed to the other type, which is the inset or the set-in sleeves. So this sleeve, as you can see from that little graphic, the front and the back panel are shaped slightly around the armholes by leaving out a few stitches, which then allows the sleeve to be set into the front and the back panel. So the front and back panel was previously shaped for the sleeve to be allowed to kind of be set in to the front and back panel. So those are our sleeve types. And going back to the sweaters constructed from separate pieces, there are other combinations of sweaters that are constructed from separate panels. So we can just take a look. I mean, this is by far not the most comprehensive list of sweaters constructed from different shapes, because crochet designers are coming up with all sorts of different combinations. So you know these are just the basic ones that I want to bring to your attention, but as I said, it's by far not the most comprehensive list, because it's endless. You can kind of sew up two rectangles and have the point at the front, and that's another shape. But let's look at the basic shapes of sweaters constructed from different rectangles, from different basic shapes. So here we are, 3 rectangles. This is a simple construction where the first rectangle covers the sleeves and the top of shoulders on the front and back panel. And then the front and the back panels are then crocheted onto this rectangle, with seaming required for the sides of the sweater and for the underside of the sleeve. So as you can see, my Christie sweater there on the side, the mustard yellow rectangle goes kind of from cuff to cuff across the top of my shoulders. And then the pink at the front is the front panel and the back panel, and you can see the seam running down the side, and there is a seam running on the underside of the sleeve. So that's a different type of construction. Then we move on to another construction, which is 2 hexagons. So the hexagons are kind of folded into the shape where one hexagon covers one sleeve and one half of the body, and then the other hexagon covers the other sleeve and the other half of the body. Then you run the seam across the front and across the back, and there are seams running at the top of your sleeve as well. So that's another two basic shapes that you can use to create a sweater. The other shape we've got is the two T-shaped pieces. So if you imagine laying a sweater flat and just slicing the sweater across from cuff to cuff, that will give you two T-shaped pieces. As you can see, my Summer Romance tee here on the side, it was constructed from two T-shaped pieces, and you kind of sew it across the top of the shoulders, underside of the sleeves, and down the sides of the sweater to create a basic shape sweater. So after we looked at basic shapes created from separate pieces, we move on to the more advanced seamless sweaters. So seamless sweaters have got some advantages and disadvantages when it comes to crocheting them. So the really great one is that they require very little or no seaming at all. However, these types of construction techniques very often involve a complicated grading and stitch math. For this reason, they're not the easiest to adjust yourself without having previous experience or truly understanding the grading and the stitch math. These sweater constructions have been meticulously designed and calculated by designers and tech editors, so the best course of action in this case is to trust the pattern designer and follow the pattern. The more top-down sweater patterns you follow and learn the process, the easier it will be for you to get real understanding of how it works. Sometimes adding a couple of more rows or rounds to your basic yoke will be enough to gain a few extra stitches needed to customize the size. The more top-down sweater patterns you follow and learn the process, the easier it will be for you to get real understanding on how it works. Sometimes adding a couple of more rounds or rows to your basic yoke will be enough to gain a few extra stitches and inches to customize the size. So let's take a look at the seamless sweaters. So I divide the seamless sweaters into two subgroups. So first subgroup is relatively seamless sweaters, which means that most of the sweater is constructed in one piece, or all of the sweater is constructed in one piece, that there is only a couple of smaller seams either at the shoulders or at the sides of the sweater to finish it off. And then we've got truly seamless sweaters, which means that there is no seaming required at all. So you'll be working in rounds, you'll be joining it together, so you don't have to seam anything at all. Okay, so let's take a look at the relatively seamless sweaters. So I've got a few examples here for you. So the first one is my sideways jumper there, is worked sideways around the main body. You can see the ribbon is kind of running from neckline to the waist. So it's worked sideways around the main body. Then the sleeves are worked straight onto the main body, and the only seams are then done at the shoulders. Okay, so you work the front and back panel together sideways, seam it at the shoulders, and then the sleeves are worked straight onto the sweater. So it's relatively seamless. There is only a small seam at the shoulders. Then the second one hiding here behind me is the sweater designed by my good friend Hannah from Hand Crochet. It's worked cuff to cuff. So you kind of start at the cuff, worked up the one sleeve, then you work the rows of the main body, and then you work down the other sleeve towards the other cuff. The sleeves are worked in round, so the only seams that you have to make are actually at the sides of the sweater to completely finish it off. And then the third one is my Horbury sweater there at the bottom. It's worked bottom up, so you start at the bottom hem working in rounds, and when you get to the armholes, the round is then split for the front and back panel. To allow for the armholes to be created. Then you kind of seam it at the shoulders, and the sleeves are again worked straight onto the main body panels to finish the sweater off. So there is only very little seam at the shoulders. Okay, So the second group of seamless sweaters are truly seamless sweaters. So these are sweaters that are worked in completely one single piece with no seaming required at all. So the one hiding behind me is Adelaide lace sweater. It's a top-down raglan style with a round yoke and with pineapple lace on the yoke. Then the second one, we've got Ada sweater, which is a top-down raglan as well, but this one has got the rectangular yoke. You can see the stitches kind of running down the side, the lacy stitches. So the rectangular yoke has got 4 different points where the increases happen to increase the size of the yoke. And then the one below, my heart lace jumper, it's a raglan style sweater as well, but this one is actually worked bottom up. So you kind of create 2 separate sleeves, 2 separate tubes for the sleeves. Then you start at the hem and work your way up. And then once you get to the armhole openings, you then incorporate the sleeves into the yoke by working across the sleeves and the front and back panel, decreasing at 4 different points again to create the raglan style sweater, but worked bottom up. Okay, so when working a top-down crochet sweater, we often use the term yoke. A crochet yoke is a functional part of a garment that refers to the upper part of a garment that covers the chest, shoulders, and upper back. Crochet yokes are very often worked in rounds, and there are 2 types of crochet yokes. So we've got the circular and rectangular yoke. So let's take a closer look at these different types of yokes. Circular yokes, here they come. So circular yokes very often worked in rounds for sweaters, or you can finish at the end of the row turn and go back for cardigans. So you kind of split at the front for a cardigan. They are often made using increases to create a flared shape that fits comfortably around the shoulder and chest. One of the advantages of a circular yoke is that it can be customized to fit different body shapes and sizes. By adjusting the number of increases, the length of the yoke, and maybe the size of the hook, it is possible to create a garment that fits perfectly. And second type of the yoke, we've got a rectangular yoke, which is constructed in a rectangular shape that extends across the shoulders and down the front and back of the garment. The increases are typically made at 4 different points of the rectangle each round, and these 4 points then naturally indicate the stitches for the front and back panels and the 2 sleeve sections. Okay, whether you are using a circular or rectangular yoke, once you reach the desired size that fits comfortably, covers the top of your torso, it is time to split the yoke. This refers to the process when the stitches of the yoke are divided to form the front panel, right sleeve, back panel, and left sleeve. The front and back are then worked together in one round, which will form the main body of the sweater. When it comes to sleeves, they are each worked separately onto the armhole opening created by splitting the yoke. When using this method, whether your yoke is circular or rectangular, you will create a true seamless sweater. Crochet yokes can be used in a variety of different types of clothing, including dresses, blouses, and tops. They can be made in a wide range of styles and designs, from simple and plain to elaborate and intricate. Okay, so after all these different construction styles, let's take a look at the beginner-friendly garment construction methods. So these methods would be perfect if you're just starting out. The best place to step up to after crocheting basic sweater is a T-shaped sweater. This is one of the easiest construction methods for beginners. All you need to create a sweater is 2 separate panels in the shape of the letter T. It allows you to alter the size by simply adjusting the size of the panels. By sewing the 2 separate T-shaped pieces together, you will create a sweater with sleeves already attached. That is super comfortable. However, this means you are a little limited on any kind of shaping. If you want to keep things simple, you can experiment with leaving a wider neck opening and maybe wear it off the shoulder. Another great choice garment to try is the drop shoulder style sweater. This is a sweater worked in separate panels. You can experiment with a little shaping around the neck The sleeves are also worked separately and sewn on afterwards, either as a true drop shoulder, or you can slightly set them in. You can also add a little shape into your sleeves by tapering them towards the wrist. This style of construction has plenty of opportunities for simple size adjustments by adjusting the size of the individual panels. Drop shoulder sweaters work well for oversized garments, which are very forgiving and great for layering. Okay, now let's move on to the other end of the scale and look at more adventurous construction styles. So if you feel a little more adventurous, the raglan top-down sweater is your next step. As the name suggests, the pattern starts at the neckline, with increases happening at 4 different points for a rectangular yoke or evenly spaced out for a circular yoke. The 4 points at the rectangle yoke then split the rounds into 4 different panels, front, back, and 2 sleeves. The rule of thumb suggests that the amount of stitches for a sleeve is 2/3 of the front panel. However, the final stitch distribution depends on many factors and very often gets tweaked. This top part of a raglan sweater is called yoke, as we learned. So when you reach certain size of the yoke, it is then split into main body and 2 separate sleeves. The biggest benefit of top-down raglan sweater is that there are no seams, which allow for a tidy finish to a handmade sweater. And the second style, I would say, is by far the most adventurous, is the bottom-up raglan style. Because as I said previously, you will create 2 different tubes, 2 different tubes for the sleeves, and then one tube for the main body, worked bottom up. Then you kind of get to join all 3 separate tubes together at the 2 points at the front and 2 points at the back, and these are the points that you're going to mark out and make decreases to shape the top of your yoke, but starting from bottom up towards the neckline, so that's why we need to decrease. So bottom up raglan styles, I would say, are by far the most adventurous types of construction styles. Okay, so, and here we are. There are many crochet garment construction methods, and modern crochet designers keep inventing more adventurous styles every day, pushing the boundaries and incorporating techniques from other crafts like knitting are becoming very popular. However, going back to the basics is the best place to start. So have fun experimenting and trying new techniques. Thank you very much for watching this video. These are all the places below where you can find me, and thank you for watching again.